Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, March 25th, 2024 public board meeting of the Kingston City Land Bank. My name is Mike. I serve as the executive director. We ask that members of the public limit their comments to no more than 2 minutes per speaker. And with that, I turn it over to Nate Hennigan, the board chair.
Hi, everyone. So this is going to be as I mentioned to my fellow board members briefly beforehand, this is going to be a little bit of a weird setup for the meeting today because I'll be leading the meeting on Zoom and then briefly having to drop off and then coming to join everybody there at City Hall in person. But for right now, for purposes of our call to order and the roll call, we do have a quorum here in the meeting. So we'll just do a quick roll call. I'll start with me, Nate Hennigan, board chair, and we'll go for others on Zoom first. So Rebecca, you next.
Hi, Rebecca Holderness, board member.
And then
Joanna Dorman, board member.
Ethel Knox, board member.
Barbara Yanides, board member.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. So we do have a quorum of the board. I will entertain a motion to accept the prior meeting minutes as uploaded to YouTube. Is there a second?
Did you have a motion? I didn't hear. Did you have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Yeah.
All right. All in favor of accepting the prior meeting minutes? All right, motion passes. Then is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
I make a motion to approve the minutes, the meeting minutes.
Meeting.
Meeting agenda.
Perfect. Is there a second? Second. All in favor of approving the meeting agenda? Perfect. That was easy. Got those out of the way. So board chair announcements, not too much new to announce this month from last month. The major updates are really going to be covered later on in the meeting, but a couple of things that might not be covered in the meeting. Let's see, our new website. I know we've talked about this a couple of meetings already. It looks great. If folks have, I don't have a headshot. If folks have headshots and want to send them in to update your profiles on there, please send them to me or Mike or Bartek to Mike, and we'll make sure to get those in there. We had scheduled the report that is required for Mike and I to give an annual report to the city council. That was scheduled for tomorrow, but unfortunately there were some conflicts with some council members, so that's getting moved to next month, which I'm actually, depending on timing, a little bit happy about because it may come after some other events we have coming up, like ribbon cutting and some other things. But on April 2nd, Mike and I are going to be on the Family of Woodstock radio show to talk a little bit about KCLB and try and get the word out. So looking forward to that. Other than that, not really any major updates from me. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to the next agenda item, which is public comments. I don't think we have any members of the public here today. In which case, we'll go to our executive director report. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Nate. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to those of you who can attend in person. Nice to see everyone in Zoom. Thank you for being here. I will, as usual, keep my report as simple as I can and group it into categories. So our pipeline category for new properties that we're looking at and evaluating hasn't changed from last month. So we're still looking at 2 properties under Resolution 172 of 2018. These are single-family homes located at 55 Rogers and 168 Fairview. The city has asked us to reach a decision on this. For context, we had asked the city in 2021 to either provide some additional information about some cloudy title issues on one of the properties or to help us in other ways to evaluate the property that clearly needs to be demolished at Fairview. And so now that we've been asked to make a decision, we are waiting. A lot of things that I'll say today are going to be, we're waiting for the bids to come back on Legacy Cities 2. When those bids are returned, the general contracting bids, that allows us to do the analysis of what we need to spend the money on by when. For the LBI 2 money, which needs to be spent by the end of this year. For the ARPA money, that if you all review and approve tonight, needs to be spent by September of 2025. And so depending on how much money we need for Legacy Cities 2, that will tell us how much other money we have to do other projects. So I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but to be continued on the analysis of those two properties. Similarly, on 177 Murray Street, this is under Reso 66 of last year. This is a property that we have been evaluating under a City of Kingston license agreement. It is included now in the ARPA agreement, and we have been given funding to make best efforts to demolish the property. So assuming that you review and approve the ARPA agreement tonight, that would be something that we would commence immediately soliciting demolition bids for that property. The second property under Resolution 66 is located in 24 Belmont. And this again is predicated on the Legacy Cities 2 general contracting bids that tell us how much money we have to do additional work. So it's a bit of a pause while we wait for those bids to come in, but April 3rd is when the bids will be received. So by the time of this next meeting, we'll have gone through our committee meetings and everyone will weigh in on the pros and cons of different courses of action. And then this meeting will not be me just telling you to wait for months. So the city, as I mentioned in previous months, is no longer currently pursuing Article 11 proceedings. For foreclosures, they are investigating Article 19A, which is the Zombie Properties Act. So I don't have any further updates on the Zombie Properties Act other than to say the city is continuing to evaluate what that might look like, and we will bring it through committee and bring it to you if properties become available. Again, if it was a quick turnaround for something, that would also be something that flows into what are we doing with the money that's left over? Or it's unobligated, I should say. None of the money will be left over. State of New York, if you're watching, you're spending all of it by December 31st. 100C, you heard it here.
All of it.
100% will be expended. My final update under pipeline is the National Community Stabilization Trust, for which I report on every single month. There are no updates this month. We've been off no progress. Okay. Pre-development is 9 properties, no change from last month. And so 6 of those properties are Legacy Cities 2, 2 of which, for context, we purchased last month. Owen is out this month. I will be ham-fisting my way through his updates at the ADC portion of this meeting. But I will just say yet again, much will come from the bids, the general contracting bids on April 3rd. Third Avenue, which we're now calling for simplicity's sake 1 property, there's many different addresses. So more updates will be at ADC. We'll be shifting over for Kyle for providing the substance of those updates. I will just be sort of shepherding the process and supporting him in that. So hopefully that'll build as the meetings go on. The final 2 properties in our pre-development category are 43 Teller and 3537 Hanratty, of which we purchased at the end of December last month. You look like you had a question. Sorry.
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So those we purchased, the plan is still in the TBD phase because we're waiting to see how much money we have to spend on available properties after the bids come back. But I will say that a neighbor in the vicinity of 3537 Hanratty did reach out with interest to purchase the property. So we let her know it's still under evaluation. We let them know it's still under evaluation, and we wanted to touch base in a few months. So that's where we left that. Property sales. We are at 3 property sales. And as Nate mentioned, we have the awesome ribbon cutting event and the commemoration of finishing the first ever Legacy Cities project. And we're scheduling a lot of things around that at comms. I expect that all 3 properties will close within 30 days. My update last month was 60 days. Now it's 30 days. We actually have the closing date set for 169 early as of like an hour ago. So tentative, but April 17th is the date that should take place. If everything falls into place, we think that's real. And I'd like to really thank Kyle, who's just been herding cats and rambling through this craziness where he's like, what is this? How does this work? Like, why is this not organized? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Can you please help? And he gets involved and things get organized and he has everything organized. And then it goes to chaos again through no fault of his own. It's just sidebar emails and conversations. It's the nature of these closings where information doesn't always, you've recently closed like stuff.
So much. What, 3 different ones coordinated? Let's say anything else.
3 different, all sorts of variables. We're closing, we have a closing date set for the first closing, and the next 2 should be in focus by our next board meeting. So let you know.
Great job.
Yeah, Kyle, thank you. Thank you. I asked this morning, I think, what if we had 10 of these? And Kyle just shook his head.
Give them another minute.
Totally, totally.
So let them know you.
We'll get through it. We're almost there. Pending new funding opportunities, as I mentioned, Kyle will address the Third Avenue relevant funding opportunities in his report at ABC. I will mention the HCR Home Program, which we brought up a few months in a row. No new information on that, but it is a retooling of HCR's affordable homeownership rehab program using federal funding. It's a $10 million program. They haven't announced anything. We'll let you know, but we're keeping our eyes on it. So that's still on there. I will mention a portion of our funding applications for the Ulster County Housing Action Fund, only as they relate in my report to Legacy Cities 2. So it looks like from the application that we can apply to use that funding. It's a new funding source. It allows for affordable homeownership rehabs to be one of the things that the funds are used for. We are meeting with the county tomorrow, as we have met with them over email, I guess, and we went to their info session on the 19th to ask the question, when will the funding really be available? And it's hard for them to say because it's the first year. And so the process for the funding is that there's a committee, the committee brings it to the executive brings it to the legislature, who then approves it. So if you think all of this is happening before we have to close on Legacy City 2 and spend all the LBI 2 money in 2024, we probably won't. But we're going to ask the questions tomorrow and try to get a better understanding of if that's realistic. Another update, an update that we gave last month was on the City of Kingston's opportunity to submit a letter of interest for the restore funding that they apply to the state every year for. It's a $70 million pot of funds. We've applied at least 2 years in a row. Kyle thankfully submitted ahead of time, ahead of schedule in early March, the LOI. We were told thanks, but no thanks, try again next year, because the city, once again, is focusing on economic development opportunities external to affordable housing. So they get to make the decision on where they focus. That remains to be where they're focused, but we can try again next year. Yep. And those are my updates on funding. I would give one last other update in my other category, which is my catch-all. Stacy is not here, unfortunately. Owen is not here, unfortunately, but I would just want to say that our audit, which you may recall has dragged on for a while every year. 2 years ago, I won't comment on. Last year, it was better than 2 years ago because Stacy was on board and sort of getting her arms around different things. We have to use this report to roll up in the City of Kingston's report that they give for their financials. Being a public agency, we use it for the ABO reporting and the comptroller reporting. So everyone's clamoring and asking for it. We're so incredibly organized this year that we were almost done with our audit. So yeah, Stacy, when you see this, because I know you watch all these, thank you very much. It's such a relief to be at this place where we're organized, and Rebecca is overseeing all of this on the finance committee. And so thank you for that as well. And that was my update. So thank you, Nate, or thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
So with that, we'll move into the committee report. And we, just to reiterate from the top of the meeting, we have 2 votes scheduled as part of the ABC report. We're going to move those a little further down in the meeting if everyone's okay with that. But if you're all cool with it, let's go ahead and jump into the ABC report. And then once you guys are done, Kyle, going through some of those updates, we'll go into the finance report. If I drop off at some point between then and now, feel free to stall for time or whatever you want to do. And I'll be in the room shortly. But jumping over to ADC.
Okay.
I know Aaron is not here, so Mike is stepping in as.
I'm happy to try my best to give the chair of the committee's report. The first item on the agenda is the pilot and the Legacy Cities 1 construction updates. Owen is also absent, but he did submit his overview for the month. As you can probably tell, we're done. So we're done. Huge kudos to Owen. We're on time. We're on budget for the Legacy Cities project. It's very exciting. We're going through final details of X, Y, and Z, but it's not even really worth mentioning just to make sure the closings happen. But the homes are amazing. The homes are fully renovated. I can't wait for you guys to see at the event at Hurley. It's beautiful what's been done on those projects. So it's a testament to really the whole team that we've been able to do this. So not just Owen, Kyle, and Stacy as well. I just signed documents. I've learned is my sole purpose on, yeah, I don't do anything, I'm really getting better at it.
I'm doing,
Just signing documents, that's all I'm good for. That's all I'm good for. But Legacy Cities 2 pre-development updates, again, Owen is out, and I won't reiterate more than I said in my updates, other than to say everything revolves around the general contracting RFP. We're getting a tremendous amount of interest from contractors. I believe we had an excess of 12 walk the site. As Owen mentioned at ADC, that doesn't always turn into 12 bids, so we'll see where that lands, and Owen will jump into it in earnest when he comes back.
There been any new bit like from the walkthroughs, any more than there were?
Any
More like,
Additional interest.
where they've taken it to a bit,
we haven't received any bids yet.
okay,
Yeah, I think they really have their heads down, they're crunching the numbers. So nothing in yet, but it will be
okay.
just a few days.
Is there a deadline or
The 3rd of April.
no? Okay, thank you.
3rd of April, they all come in, everything unlocks. So those were my updates to Owen's updates, and Kyle, if you wouldn't mind giving your updates.
Sure thing.
Can you zoom in
Yeah.
just a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Double the size.
Looking good.
Is that better?
thank you.
Yeah.
It's in the package as well, but honestly, I think Mike kind of summarized it pretty well with his summary of Owen's thoughts that we're basically wrapped up with the project. This is actually a little bit behind what Owen reported. I just got those final construction payouts from Owen this afternoon, so I'll update this for next month. But basically, we expect to wrap up, we just wrapped up construction on the project. The only remaining costs we'll be seeing here are some soft costs that we hope to close out with the final sales of the property in the next month. So yeah, this is for requisition 17. Rec 18 will be coming this week, and hopefully requisition 19 will be the last requisition on this project, and we'll be all complete here on time, on budget.
Yes.
That's it on the Legacy Cities financing, unless anybody has any questions. All right. I guess we'll jump into Third Avenue, the pre-development updates as well. So overall, just the big picture updates. We've had a preliminary meeting with the city to discuss the project, and we've taken their feedback into account. We're working with a civil engineer right now to integrate those comments and to finalize a stormwater management plan for the site. Once we get the comments back from the civil engineer, we're going to work with the architect to finalize a preliminary informal site plan, something that we feel comfortable that we can bring to planning. They'll pass the muster there. And once we've moved on that, we hope to move on to some more site work, like borings. But associated with the Third Avenue project, we've been hard at work on grant applications. There's 3 with upcoming deadlines that Mike and I have been hard at work on. We were asking for a total of $4.7 million across these 3 sources. It's the congressionally directed spending. So that's Schumer and Gillibrand. The Mid-Hudson Momentum Fund, where that's the Economic Development Corporation's plan funding opportunity, and then the Ulster County Housing Action Fund. As Mike mentioned, there's a possibility of using some of these funds for Legacy Cities too, but I think we're going to emphasize using these funds for Third Avenue on this project. Yeah, we've made a lot of progress on this to date. Application's nearly complete, and Mike's been hard at work getting support letters for all of these applications. We've got support letters from Senator Hinchy, Assembly Member Shrestha, and Mayor Noble for all of these grant applications, and we'll be hopefully submitting them and reporting back next month with more info, hopefully some feedback.
Thanks, Kyle. So I see Nate has dropped off. So if you don't mind, I'll pretend to be Nate for just a minute to keep the meeting moving. Just for context, Nate had decided to move those 2 votes for the ARPA contract and for the asbestos abatement and asbestos monitoring. I guess it's 3 contracts to the end of it so that he can jump back on or he'll be here in person. So, so the next item would be our Finance and Audit Committee. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, sorry not to see you guys in person. Always a pleasure. Never a pleasure being on the big screen. But so unless, you know, getting paid millions of dollars and going to the Oscars, which isn't really where we are right now. So the financial committee is hard at work supervising. Barbara was there, so you can ask Barbara any substantive questions. I have some top-down reporting. This is from Stacy. So here are some bullet points, we might call them. The KCLB purchased the following 5 properties from the city of Kingston: 3537 Henratty, 43 Teller, 291-303 West O'Reilly, 28 Abbey, and 20 Stefan, I think we say. The total cost of legal and title was $27,221.72. The Kingston City Land Bank sold 291-303 West O'Reilly to a neighbor for $20K. 143rd 3rd Avenue was donated to the Kingston City Land Bank. The $250K CD matured and 7753.64 of interest was received. It is my understanding that that's to be reinvested into the CD, another CD. Is that right, Mike? Right?
Yes, we actually had closed the first CD, not knowing where the interest rates would go, and opened another one around the same time. And so the interest continues to come in. We continue to earn interest, I should say.
We are accumulating, we were doing strategic observation of the interest rate, as we've said before. We're accumulating invoices to submit to LBI2 for reimbursement. As of 2/28/24, the total approximates $30K. All of the expenses are brilliantly within budget. KCB Meta Legacy Cities 1, RAC 17 was submitted. It sounds like maybe we were ahead of that. I'm not sure. Inching Rogers closer to be finished, and all expenses there are in line with budget. So we are making magic with what we have to work with in brilliant, elegant, and on budget ways. And that's the Finance Committee report.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And once again, parroting our board chair, could I hear a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
Motion to accept the treasurer's report.
You're a first. Do I hear a second? And a second. How do you vote?
In favor.
It's unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you again. So our next committee report will be the Communications, Community Engagement, and Fundraising Committee. I have been deputized by Bartek, who's also unable to attend this meeting, to give his updates, which are as follows. For everyone's awareness, although I think you all know, on the 11th of April, we will be having our ribbon cutting event at 169 Hurley. That's at 5 p.m. The press release and the invites are very much in process. Kyle and I are working very hard on those, and it will be great. The committee discussed potentially reaching out to the O Positive Festival with relation to something at 3rd Avenue. So stay tuned for that. I think that conversation is ongoing over email outside of the committee meeting itself. Very exciting opportunity. And I will put the next item to the very end, but then I will just say in the fundraising side, it was decided at the committee to focus specifically on reducing the purchase price on future homes with a campaign over a longer period of time this year. So we've done this in the past, just for context. We fundraise off of directly buy down the price of the homes. It's done really well because it's totally transparent where the money is going. And that was what the committee decided. The committee also decided to not focus on applying for grants unless there was a specific opportunity. I'm reading the words on the page, so said by the chair of the committee. Those are my updates, other than to say the committee chair has said, I think we should keep social media RFP open until we find someone. That is his recommendation. I will say, just for the purposes of continuity and everyone knowing, we do have 2 submissions now. One just came in a few hours ago. So maybe that comment was a little bit outdated, but I'm sure we'll track over email because the RFP is not due until the end of the day tomorrow.
I have a question about that RFP staying open, because because the RFP is closing tomorrow and
Yes.
Bartek's not here, if we wanted to try to keep it open, even just to give us a chance to collect around it, the committee to collect around it, is there something that we can do that, or do we want, I don't know if there's a timeline on the, I don't remember, I've read the RFP a couple times, I don't remember if there's a timeline, like how long we're engaging with this individual. Do we want to go with what we have and come back around? So where will there be a moment for us to discuss that, given the timing?
Sure. Thank you for raising that. I almost forgot the reality of saying, like, the RFP is almost expiring, so there's that. I did circulate both of the RFP responses to the comms committee today, and I'll follow up, Rebecca, if this makes sense, or anyone on the comms committee wants to talk about it, to the comms committee and say, like, do you want to extend? Do you want to end? Does that sound fair? Like a way to either keep it open or not, rather than, it hasn't been even brought to the board or evaluated by the committee, so like the committee.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be formal. We extended it last time by a month just via text message agreement of the committee that happened very quickly. But I will send that email tonight. Rebecca, and thank you for raising it. Just see. Okay. So. Go. I'm so good at paying attention. Okay, the next item, which I am also giving a report for, is the governance committee, which did meet and has brought to you the second reading of the bylaws. You made a bylaw revision. It's been quite some time since we revised our bylaws. That is something that we may want to also see if we can wait a few minutes to vote on or have a public discussion about, but just for context, we had considered a revision in February, I think, board meeting. That was tabled for a request to have a full board meeting, again, an interim board meeting, to discuss alternative revisions to the bylaws. The changes that were discussed and included in your board package include removing the residency requirements, provided that someone has a clear tie to the city of Kingston at the board's discretion. It also removes the requirements for board members to reside in the various congressional boards, which is really hard to track, and it changes. And I think it's kind of a vestigial thing as to how the land bank was originally set up versus now. We do have representation throughout the city. We are building throughout the city. So I think some of those hesitations maybe are no longer. Oh my goodness. Hey, I was just stretching it out. I was trying to do that. Good work. We're talking about the bylaws.
Perfect. This is separate from the bylaws.
Sure.
We can go first and then go on about board recruitment.
Yes. I did have a note from Bartek on board recruitment. I believe the update was it had been decided to wait until the final seat was filled to fill any board seats. That was what Bartek emailed me. So those are the words that I'm saying to you.
That's close.
Yeah, but also I think it's good. I mean, I don't know if Rebecca heard this and Ethel, but like we really want to make an effort to fill those seats. And so like it's going to come down to us reaching out to our networks and really seeing like, and once we vote, depending on how the vote goes for residency requirements, like, yeah, just, I think it's time for us to make a concerted effort to really see, like, think about who we know. And then also, yeah, just be a little more forward. Like, it would be great if it coincides with the social media aspect of being able to get more information out and things like that. But, yeah, because we just want to be really intentional with these last two spots that we have.
Cool.
So while you were making it
Where were we?
30 seconds or less, which I don't understand, we were discussing the bylaw revisions, and the second reading of bylaws would be tonight for a vote.
Perfect.
That's what we said.
So, did we redo the second reading yet? No, we did not. Let me pull up the language, but just to summarize while I'm looking for it. Essentially what we did was after our sort of interim meeting we did during governance. I think we were all on board with losing the language in the bylaws that talked about having to have a certain board member from different wards or legislative districts, I think. We hadn't really been following that. The legislative districts kept shifting, so it didn't make sense. I think we were on, sorry, not a breath from upstairs. It didn't really make sense to keep those legislative districts. We weren't really following it anyway. We had a bit of back and forth about the residency requirement, and I can't seem to find the exact language that we landed on, but I think it was having a demonstrated. There we go. Oh, it is in the package.
Yeah, it's page 57.
Thank you.
On your phone.
Gosh.
The search function helps.
57 PDF.
Yes.
I've got these big long board packets. Doesn't make it any easier. So anyway, we got rid of the legislative district requirement. And now are deleting the residency requirement in paragraph A, and instead adding a new paragraph B that says each director shall have a demonstrable connection to the city of Kingston as determined by the existing board. And just to add a little color to that, the idea was to at least include some language that is flexible, gives the board a little flexibility to determine what that connection looks like without tying it specifically to a particular zip code or business or something else, but still having some language in there that at least shows they gotta be tied to Kingston in some way. Can't, it's not just like a board member from some random place,
Totally.
right? So yeah, so any discussion on that? Comments or questions? No?
I think it captures and gives us flexibility. Captures what we're looking for, casting a wider net, but we can still, make sure it makes sense.
Maybe. Well, then with that, I'll entertain a motion to vote on the amendment to the bylaws.
Motion to vote.
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Rebecca. All in favor of the amendments to the bylaws as presented in the board package? All right, the vote's unanimous. Congratulations. That was a big deal. Yeah. Okay.
Now leave Kingston.
Yeah.
I
know. It's all that time to get, now just get out.
Now we just have like a big, if we can't fill these board seats now, we're in trouble.
Exactly. Okay, so maybe next we'll just finish with the committee updates. It's just a design committee. So we didn't meet, I think our meeting's this Thursday, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna be emailing out the committee later today or tomorrow, because one of our goals was to start putting together sort of a book of contacts for architects slash designers that, so that when we do have new properties that come on, we have sort of a go-to list of people that we can reach out to, trying to reach out to those folks early, seeing if they could give us some kind of like portfolio or something we could review to determine if we want to have them on this list. And that way we just have it in our back pocket. So I say this here for folks who are also not on the design committee. If you know of anyone or have any recommendations, please send them our way. But yeah, my goal is at this Thursday's meeting to have us start doing that reach out. Maybe everybody have at least one or two companies or people to reach out to. So yeah.
Are most of those vendors local, like Hudson, Valley, like Kingston based, or does it span like going up to Albany or?
I mean, right now, we don't have any sort of a list. So, I mean, we have architects we've used. We have some designers we've worked with, but we don't really have like an ongoing list. So I would say, you know, obviously we would have a preference for folks who are based out of Kingston, if that's possible, but cast a wide net, you know?
Yeah.
For example, there was someone that I had in mind who we met at the Preservation Awards from last year. They're based out of Troy. So, you know, any ideas, if you guys have them, send them our way. Be good to get that going. Okay. So let's jump back to the votes. First, ARPA contract for discussion. Mike, did you already review the sort of summary?
No,
All right,
just
do you
wait.
want to?
I'm happy to
Okay.
give my review if
Yeah.
you like. Okay, so our ARPA agreement with the city of Kingston allows us to be a subrecipient under their master grant with the federal government. So they're working with the Treasury Department, I believe. Our subrecipient grant amount has increased from the last time that we spoke about it due to some increase in funds that were made available to potentially demo 177 Murray. So we're now at $1.250 million total. 125,000 or 10% of that can be used for admin expenses. It doesn't have to be, but it was something the city introduced into the contract. And so there's some flexibility around that piece of it. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility around the use of funds. So we can use it for new construction. We can use it for rehabs. We can use it for demo. We can use it for site cleanup. So that was basically all we could think of to use it for. So the city was very flexible, which we appreciate in getting us to this point. So I will highlight some of the things to keep in mind is that the funds are on a reimbursable basis. So the land bank has to spend the money, document that they've spent the money, submit to the city of Kingston, receive a reimbursement, which we're very organized, I think, and I think our documentation is very clear. The timelines for reimbursement, we don't really know, and it may take a minute to get a handle on those timelines. So for the finance committee and others watching, that is a piece just to keep in mind that we'll be expending a significant amount of funds and then going to get the funds reimbursed. We're very familiar, I think, with doing this with both the LBI 1 funds and the LBI 2 funds, and we did this for the ARPA nonprofit grant, which we totally closed out earlier last year. But I did want to highlight that both that and the LBI 2 funds are on a reimbursable basis. So for the purposes of our cash flow, we'll be putting a significant amount of funding out and then getting it back from sources. So it requires a fair amount of attention to detail, which I think that I'm confident that we have. We've been doing it now for quite some time, but I did want to highlight that's a piece of it, that it's reimbursable only. The term of the agreement is September 30th of 2025. The city's term with the federal government is December 31st of 2026. So while it could be the case that the city may extend our agreement, that is not in the contract. They did not agree to put that in the contract, and we should not be counting on that. That's a clock that we're going to be building towards and sort of measuring our success against. Finally, we must abide by the city's municipal preference policy. This is something that had come up almost in January, and then we didn't talk about it, but there was a little bit of discussion. The city's municipal preference policy, which is Exhibit 2 in the contract, requires that for 70% of the units for which we take the ARPA funds, not 70% of all the units that we do, but 70% of the units that we spend the ARPA funding on for residential housing, that we have to abide by the city's preference policy. It's a points-based system. And without Nate, we would not be here because for many different reasons, his experience and his leadership, but also how tired I was and how tired Ryan was. And so getting involved in this, we met with Thomas Silverstein of the Lawyers Committee is the name of the group, who advised us in no uncertain terms that, quote, this policy poses a low risk of a suit in New York State. Low
Lawyers
risk.
Committee on Civil Rights. So it's a nonprofit organization. They do a lot of legal advocacy work. We had been in touch with them a couple of years ago, I think, talking about the possibility of doing some kind of a preference policy for people who live in Kingston. They reviewed it, but it was, at that time, it was kind of in the abstract. So this was the first time they had like an actual policy that the city had put together to review in light of that. And so that was their takeaway.
Which was very heartening to me for what that's worth. It's good to hear someone with the right background and the law degree opining on legal matters that shouldn't be. The two last things that I will mention just for your awareness, as part of this agreement, working with Pathstone, our homeownership counseling service in Newburgh, the Kingston City Land Bank will be indemnifying them from claims falling from under having to do with the policy. And the city of Kingston will not formally be indemnifying the land bank. So that was a point of discussion. We see it as a known risk, and I feel it's important to just state that as a known risk of the agreement. Those were my notes.
I have a question. And I did spend some time looking, I read the grant and spent some time looking at the demonstration of how it is implemented, the policy at the end. And could you just clarify for me the voting system that goes with this? I have two questions really. The voting system for this policy is implemented after the income requirement is met?
That's correct. Yes, thank you for reading it so closely. The requirement is for the organization to have its own internal guidelines and then apply the policy. So in no way, shape, or form would the Kingston City Land Bank or its board be required to change income or household requirements, things like that. Does that answer your question, Rebecca?
Yeah, yes. And I would like to reiterate that the matters that the point system relates to are self-identified by the people who are applying, right? So that those matters are self-identified. And my understanding, Mike, would be that we have no responsibility or agency. In fact, we just take whatever that information is and use the appropriate indicated point system in addition to the other matters that we look for in an application. That's correct?
Thank you for reading it so closely. It is self-reported. The info that's collected, and as to the nature of what that means for this organization, I think that's been the subject of my sweaty hands even right now. So not sure. Maybe
Right, so I just mean that it seems to me that the reason I ask these questions is not to be difficult, but to say that the Kingston City Land Bank's responsibility, it seems to me, and if I'm making this too simple, Nate, will you please tell me, is to implement its policies as we are already outlined in terms of when we are offering homes, income, family size, et cetera. After that, to offer an opportunity for people to self-identify in these points or not, I guess, and then to assign the appropriate points, right? That is really it. Now, whether Pathstone would do that, is Pathstone the people that would do that? And that's why we're indemnifying them against any, but it just seems perhaps more straightforward, Mike, than I would have thought in a way, in terms of what our responsibility is in adhering to it. And I feel better. My hands are still sweaty, but I feel better about the relationship between the ARPA grant and what our requirements might be and how we might be working with it. So.
Yeah,
Where does the funding come from that they're going to reimburse?
The Treasury Department was actually stimulus funded. All municipalities based on some formula, I don't remember.
Well, no, where does our money, like we're putting the money up first?
It's our unrestricted cash.
Okay.
Or a combination of acceptable grant funding that could be used to reimburse other grant funding. It'll be a bit of a.
Yeah.
Multiple.
And so just a matter of like, because there's a deadline of when we have to spend that money.
Right.
But we also, do we have that money in grants to be able to?
Awesome question. I think that we will drill down probably at the finance committee and come up with some best rules of practice to say that in no time period more than this, we shall not be expending more than that. Now that has to be realistic against the construction schedule, everything else. So a little bit, but I think what we can do, which we've done now for 18 months in a row, is have a very rigid requisition process that we stick to. And that's we're sweeping our side of the street. We'll have the state of New York is incredibly fast in returning the LBI 2 requisitions. They work so hard on it, it's in a matter of days. And I expect the city would be the same as well. So to to your point, we will be possibly expending unobligated cash and then seeking to have it reimbursed rather quickly. So we wouldn't be putting more into CD as possible.
I would just say there's remarkable efficiency inside of the accounting, reporting, and requisitioning end of the business. So the Kansas City Land Bank, I am not concerned that we would be unable to manage the what is essentially really a balancing act, really, right? But it seems to me that we're doing that already with some degree of success, right? So I'm just repeating what Mike said, really.
Thank you.
Head of the finance committee, I'm saying I think we can do it. That's really what I'm saying.
Thank you.
I just have one, like, I don't know if this is something for more of an executive session, but for people who are more familiar with the ins and outs of the grant, like, are there any points for or against that people should be aware of? Is that something we could discuss in executive session?
I don't think so. I think it's open.
I mean, I can talk about that, you know. So, I mean, the four is, this is a huge amount of money that will be really, really helpful and sort of instrumental, especially in projects like the Third Avenue project, where this is our first time doing new construction and, you know, we're really gonna need that money. It's also great that it's, you know, up until this point, other than, I guess, the fact that we have some like deferred cost properties where the city gave it to us for $1. But if you exclude that, up until this point, we have not taken $1 from the city of Kingston. And even with this money, technically, we can still say that these are federal funds because this is part of COVID stimulus money. And so, you know, it's not money that's like coming from some other, program cut or something in the city of Kingston, so all of that is good. You know, it doesn't impact our ability to set income standards, so we can still stick to our mission of providing affordable housing, doesn't impact that. And, you know, the only thing that I will say is a pro and a con, and it depends on how we see it and how this is administered, is we went back and forth a lot on this municipal preference policy. It has been a point of criticism, frankly, from the city council and from others in the city, that there's a sense, there's a feeling that, well, the Kingston City Land Bank is a quasi-city organization, and it should really be offering affordable housing to people in Kingston. Why are we not doing something like that? And that was the whole reason why we explored with the lawyers committee a few years ago, whether or not that was a possibility. So the pro is obviously for the first time, we would be implementing something like that. And I think that is great. There are downsides though. I mean, this is, you know, if there weren't at least some level of risk, we wouldn't have had to ask the lawyers committee what level of risk they thought there was, right? You know, there have been lawsuits about certain preference policies and how they're administered and how they look. This one has this whole point system that's really going to change, you know, how we do the lottery, where it assigns these points. I think the highest preference is for those who are residents and or worked in the city of Kingston. There's other points given like on sort of lower tier for people who are victims of domestic violence and people who have disabilities. Again, great, noble things to help support. There's an administrative element that we grappled with when negotiating this contract that I would be remiss if I didn't say something to all of you about. That, you know, this is self-reported. And so when someone goes to Pathstone and fills out their forms, like, we don't know that process. We don't know how much it's being vetted. And, you know, there is some reason behind that. Like, we don't want to know that process because we're the ones sort of picking the lot. I mean, picking, it's a lottery, a blind lottery, but having that extra level of space between us and that is good. So we don't really want to know how that process works, but, you know, there is some uncertainty in how much is this being vetted and actually, you know, reviewed to make sure that the things that people are self-reporting are accurate, right? I would hope that they are, but again, we don't have as much visibility into that. So, you know, that was a criticism, but this was a plan that the city drafted and put out. We didn't put it together. You know, it's not like this was a policy that was reviewed by the city council and voted on by anyone publicly. So this was something that was, you know, put together by the city, the mayor's administration, and we're sort of running with it based on an evaluation of the legal risk, based on the fact that other organizations in town are also implementing a similar policy. And so, yeah, I mean, those are what I think the major drawbacks are, but. Can I ask a couple of questions, just because it's been a while since I've read it? So we do have pretty broad rights in terms of what we can spend the funds on. What can we not spend it on? We can't spend it on purchases of properties, right?
Purchases of properties and non-residential affordable housing properties. So if we were to build mixed-use properties, the ARPA funding would only go into the residential. They only want it to be used for residential affordable housing, but I'm sorry.
No, it's not.
Absolutely. It can be used on mixed-use buildings, but it can be used on the residential portion of the
So it
mixed-use
can be
buildings.
used on.
Yes, it can. Yes.
Okay.
And the preferential, like, policy, that new one, that will only be required for the properties that the funding actually goes to.
Correct.
So depending on like what buckets of funding we have, we don't have to allocate that to all of our projects, right? It
Correct.
could just be a certain,
Correct.
like if we have some hesitation, like trying to figure out this new policy, maybe
Right.
not do all buildings.
And that was something we discussed too, is that, you know, how can we silo, like, we don't wanna,
Yeah.
you know, cut off our arm
Right.
just for that purpose of like a risk that may or may not ever happen, but how can we sort of mitigate that risk in the best way possible that, you know, if it's 70% of all the units that get any funding, well, like, we're not gonna spend $10 on one unit, and then that unit's not subject to this policy, right? So we sort of like bunch together the funding in a specific set of units that 70% of which would be subject to this,
Mhm.
and then there would be a certain number that probably wouldn't.
Okay.
I mean, I would say that my diving into the grant did raise questions for me about the Kingston City Land Bank's relationship to property that we might build that is rental property. Like, what is our long-term relationship to that, right? But I don't know that that is even a good question or relevant to accepting the grant. I think that that's an orange, not an apple, right? That the grant seems quite flexible to me, as we've said already, in terms of what the money can be used for. And if we don't use it all in the right time, we give it back, we do our reporting and we stay quite where I suppose I think more and more that it's our job to be transparent about what we're doing, to have a good public access point so people can find out and be willing to, stand in the flack, right? Occasionally. That I think that is part of the job, really, and that the policy is not our policy, it is the city's policy, right? That's where it came from. So I just think we need to do the best we can, or the ARPA policy. I mean, I think we need to not be afraid, not to be afraid to grow and not to be afraid to flex and change, right? That as long as we keep talking and we do the right research. Thank you, Nate. I mean, I wish I had been at that conversation. I'm sure it was quite interesting, your exploration of that problem. So, good.
It wasn't as interesting as it sounded.
So I don't know if that makes sense. We can't anticipate everything that will come down the pike. We can only do the best job we can and to be responsible towards all the funding that we get, not just this, right? So which we do.
Yeah, no, 100%, I agree with that. I mean, that was, like, we have to balance those risks against, you know, how much this is gonna help our mission. And just to clarify, at least up till this point, rental properties have not been part of that mission, so I don't think we have to worry about that right now or possibly ever, but, you know, everything that you're saying is sort of exactly in line with what our feelings were about this and why we're recommending it to all of you, but still want to be upfront about all the caveats and reservations that we have. Thank you.
Could I highlight one minor additional piece
Please,
of
yeah.
information? Because when Barbara, you had raised spreading it around between buildings and how that might work. The maximum amount per unit is a pretty big number. It's $198,000. So in theory, we could do 5. And Murray. So, or more, but we were trying to minimize the potential risk that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No, otherwise, is there a motion to vote on the ARPA contract as presented in board package?
I would move that we vote on the ARPA package.
Is there a second? Seconded. All in favor of the ARPA contract as presented in the board package? Motion passes.
All right, Kyle, let's get to work. We've been sitting on our hands long enough. Thank you. Congratulations.
Okay, I think that's the last thing before we move to executive session, right? Okay, so right now I will entertain a motion to vote, right, or at least move to,
Yeah, discussed it.
yeah, is there a motion to move to enter into executive session in order to discuss the asbestos abatement and monitoring contracts?
Motion to move into executive session to discuss.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, welcome back from executive session. I will now entertain a motion to vote on the asbestos abatement, to enter into contract negotiations with Shalom Environmental for asbestos abatement at an amount not to exceed what was discussed during the executive session. You don't have to repeat all that, you can just say motion.
Yeah.
So moved. Sure, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor of entering contract negotiations with Shalom Environmental, an amount not to exceed the amount we discussed in executive session? All right, motion passes. And then lastly, I'll entertain a motion to enter contract negotiations with Ambient, just Ambient,
I think it's ambient environment.
Ambient Environmental for asbestos monitoring, consistent with their quoted amount in prior contracts. Is there a motion?
So. Motion.
Is there a second? I'm making it easy, but I'm the one saying the wrong thing. So moved. All in favor of entering contract negotiations with Ambient Environmental, consistent with their quote and prior contracts? Motion passes. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. When you see this, we have to get to work.
we're just giving Kyle and Owen a lot more work to do, so. That was it. So no members of the public are here for public comments. Any new business anyone would like to discuss? No? Then with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourn? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Rebecca. See you guys.